Tomorrow's citizen of the world, today's child. Volatile, eager, pulsing with life. Avid for experience, for excitement, for pleasure. Avid for knowledge. Who and what am I? How does it work? What does it mean? 1,000 questions and needs demanded of those who so largely shape the minds of children, their teachers. We really meet 6 teachers here since Miss Reed has been a working teacher and will be again when she finishes a degree course in education at McGill University. Professor Seeley is a social scientist and educator whose lectures, research, and writings are internationally known and respected. How did you feel about those opening words, Professor Seeley? Does the teacher largely shape the child's mind?
Yes, I think the total environment, the family and the school, the parents and the child's playmates do this, though the teacher plays a very important role.
A heavy responsibility, Miss Reed.
Well, I think it's one that most teachers accept, though I do feel, as Professor Seeley said, that the teacher is just one influence.
Yes, and the words shaping the child's mind are not quite right. I think the teacher aims to help the child be what he best can be.
Mm-hmm. Well, you'll have the opportunity to apply that idea to 4 teachers in 4 corners of the world, in Japan, Poland, Puerto Rico, and Canada. We'll screen the stories one at a time and then ask you to comment in between. And I think we might as well start farthest afield in Japan. The scene is rural Japan, in an area of impressive mountains and fertile valleys. A good many of the school children come from the valley farms. No school buses here. Distances are not great, and the children can easily walk to schools in the central community, the town of Nakatsugawa, a place of about 50,000 people. The universal traffic problem found also in Nakatsugawa. The school day starts early in Japan. These youngsters are en route to school by 8 o'clock, the time the factories sound their sirens for the start of the workday. Our Japanese teacher is the one pushing the bicycle. He's Mr. Kondo, a man of 37 who teaches a 6th grade class. Mr. Kondo's married, has 2 children of school age, and he puts in a long, hard day. As does one of his pupils, young Hara, who delivers newspapers both before and after school. I guess Hara's a little late this morning.
What's Mr. Kondo's academic background?
He's a graduate of a teacher's school where he took a 2-year course after 5 years of middle school or high school education.
Looks like a very cheerful group.
Yes, you'll find a very happy, informal atmosphere in this class. Those are not test papers, by the way. They're envelopes containing money for the daily school lunch, which is paid for partly by the parent, partly by the government.
Do the children get free books?
No, they don't. But books apparently are quite cheap, and there are no school fees. Also, education is compulsory until age 14.
Yes, that's remarkable because Japan has, as you know, a very sizable school population. I hear there are about 13 million children of school age, and 99% are in school, which is pretty high.
Yes, very high. This is another class in the same school. Is this a familiar sight, Miss Reed?
Oh, yes. This must be some sort of a story, song, and dance. It's always great fun.
Mr. Kondo again, in lighter mood this time.
You know, this teacher, indeed the whole school, doesn't reflect at all the stereotype picture that we have of Japan as being characterized by rather rigid formality and a sort of authoritarian type of discipline. And here we seem to have great good humor and a feeling of intimacy and closeness, which is very stimulating and very healthy. And I don't doubt that it's heightened by Mr. Kondo's own pleasant personality.
Time now for recess and games. This school, like most Japanese schools, is crowded. There's a general shortage of classrooms and teachers.
Well, that's a pretty universal problem. It's very bad. In fact, that's what makes the mass school, where all the classes are too large and the teachers' energies are too thinly spread. Don't you agree, Miss Reed?
That's true. You can't really give as much personal attention to each student as you should.
The principle of the electric motor, studied by Mr. Kondo's sixth graders. Isn't this rather advanced work for this age group?
Well, I think it is. Canadian curricula do vary, of course, from province to province, but I doubt if our sixth graders are so far advanced in physics, let alone so practical.
Japan is so highly industrialized. Perhaps that accounts for more advanced technical study in the elementary school.
Yes, that could well be true, but did you notice that these children are working individually? So often we let ours work in groups where they share a project, and I think we need a lot of individual effort too, where each child gets a greater sense of personal challenge and accomplishment.
Now it's lunchtime. Every day a hot meal is served to all the children. As you can see, they help with the serving, but the teacher must supervise and must also plan the menus. And as we've seen, collect the money. It's quite a responsibility.
Well, this is more than interesting. It's good, quite apart from considerations of better nutrition or health. What we see is a real family-like situation with the teacher, in a sense, providing the food and serving it as well. And that means he becomes almost like a parent. And to a small child, as you know, food and love are pretty closely related.
Mm-hmm. You may find the same values in this next situation. Every day, the teacher and his pupils clean the classroom together.
Yes, it has some of the same qualities.
Professor Seeley, what's the value of a family atmosphere in a classroom?
Well, it helps the teacher cease to be just a boss or a detached master or mistress, and takes us some way to becoming a close friend and companion.
This is true, of course, of many North American teachers.
Oh, absolutely, but you'll admit that our school routines make it very hard for teachers to show any possibilities that they might have as loving, giving parents.
Well, the school day is over in the Katsugawa for the children, but not for their teachers. They have most of their workday still ahead of them. Mr. Kondo and some of his colleagues go from school to a parent-teacher meeting. PTA organization is very widespread in Japan, apparently, and also very functional. Individual contact between parent and teacher now seems to take place almost exclusively at PTA meetings.
This seems more like a party than a meeting.
Yes, I gather this is a special affair, a sort of social gathering of a committee. Certainly not the full membership of that school's PTA. It's probably in the hundreds, judging from the number of pupils. On this particular day, as happens fairly frequently, there's a meeting of the National Congress for Educational Research, a body organized by the Teachers Union. And at these tremendous mass meetings, a wide range of subjects is dealt with, all bearing, of course, on the content of curriculum and method. Mr. Kondo, as you see, is in attendance. Do we go in for comparable teacher gatherings, Professor Seeley?
Well, our teachers usually work in smaller groups, and obviously that's more effective for discussion. And maybe the Japanese do too on other occasions.
Yes. And here we have the Kondo family at home, enjoying a rare moment of relaxation. Mrs. Kondo used to be a primary school teacher. Young Kondo's passion is obviously stamp collecting. A fair number of married women carry on teaching in Japan, but not in the case of Mrs. Kondo. Whatever this game is, it's played with Western-style cards, as you'll see. As I said before, Mr. Kondo's day is long and busy. He's at work almost constantly from early morning to midnight or later. Whenever he's free of school duties during holidays, he works as a farmer to augment the family income. And that's Mr. Kondo's day.
What salary would he be paid as a teacher?
He gets $73 a month, 12 months a year, and then there are various benefits, pension on retirement, credit facilities, health insurance. There are housing projects for teachers in Japan, and then there are other smaller benefits.
Is it true that even so his real income would be well below the average of all farm and factory people, and indeed of all salaried and waged people?
That's quite true. His earnings are below the general average.
Well, that seems to be a pretty universal problem.
Yes. What do you think of Canadian rates of pay, Miss Reed?
Well, they've improved quite a bit over the last few years, but by comparison with other professions, I think they're still quite low. Wouldn't you say that, Professor Seeley?
Yes, I certainly would. A teacher with a BA degree or better has put in as much time and money as an engineer, but the engineer gets far more, and if he makes a mistake, it's not as catastrophic, even if he collapses the Barra de Inlet Bridge.
Well, is pay everything?
No, good pay won't make a poor teacher good, though poor pay will discourage the good teachers. But I think until we pay teachers like business executives, we won't get responsible, expert people in large numbers, and I'd add we don't deserve them.
And as you said, that's probably a universal situation.
Yeah.
Mr. Kondo seemed to teach a variety of subjects. Is that a general practice in any elementary school, Miss Reed?
I believe it is, yes, except perhaps in private schools.
Wouldn't specialization be a better system? That is, one teacher to one subject for all grades?
On the surface, it seems to be more efficient, but I feel that you lose that personal, friendly contact that Professor Seeley was speaking of.
Yes, I agree thoroughly with Miss Reed. I think what small children need is total care rather than sort of educational musical chairs. And the value of having one trusted, loving teacher far outweighs at that age any benefits of specialization that they could get.
A teacher like Mr. Kondo, for instance.
Yes, exactly. With children of the age of his class, he'd be rather wasted, I think, as an arrow specialist. You know, that natural warmth that he showed and his closeness to the children and his obvious enjoyment of what he was doing, those are his greatest assets. And they bloom best in a single class situation.
You both obviously liked Mr. Kondo.
Well, I did. He created an air of great intimacy and great mutual interest between himself and the children. And these qualities, I thought, showed up very well, too, in the scenes where they were eating together and cleaning up together.
All right. For contrast now, let's switch back to the Western Hemisphere and our next point of call, Puerto Rico. Our Puerto Rican teacher, Juan Fernandez, and his family live on a very North American-style street of trim bungalows. The amenities include a morning milk delivery, as you see. Both parents work in this household. Mrs. Fernandez, collecting the milk, is a factory worker. She and her husband Juan find that 2 wage earners are necessary to support their home, which is obviously quite modern and comfortable. Juan Fernandez is 27 and teaches 5th and 6th grades. They can't afford a nursemaid or sitter for their only child, an infant, so baby and bottles must be delivered each morning to a very convenient and doting mother-in-law who lives just down the street.
As a matter of domestic curiosity, what is the family income?
Juan is paid $230 a month, American, and his wife earns $42 a week. That would be something over $5,000 a year, all told.
That's a fairly good income for Puerto Rico.
Yes, though a teacher's salary there is described as being well below professional levels. There's the fond grandmother, seemingly delighted with her duty. So the family breaks up for the day. Both parents travel to their jobs via carpools. Juan's is the longest trip. Though he lives in the city, he teaches in a rural school. Rural Puerto Rico is very pretty, very fertile, but very crowded, especially with youngsters. 53% of the population is under 19 years of age.
Would it follow then it's a large school population?
Yes, quite large. Almost 1 in every 3 Puerto Ricans is attending school or college. Education is compulsory to age 14, but aside from this, the island's people have a great passion for education.
Yes, and the general passion to be educated is fed by their own government, so the costs of education, which are very high for poor Ireland, are cheerfully and one would almost say eagerly accepted.
This is our school, located in a rural community called Cupibajo. As you've seen, most of the children come in from the surrounding countryside. Juan Fernandez has been teaching for 5 years. He's a Korea veteran and a BA graduate of the University of Puerto Rico.
Hemos dicho que las estaciones del año se deben a la inclinación de la Tierra sobre su eje y al movimiento de la Tierra alrededor de el Sol. Esto causa también la diferente...
Can you follow, Professor Seeley?
Just fairly well. This is a geography lesson.
En esta parte aquí de la Tierra, y eso lo conocemos como la zona, como el Ecuador. Ahora, aquí puede decirme cómo que se llama esta parte de aquí donde los rayos de sol dan oblicuos, que hace mucho frío. Vamos a ver,
Zona fría del norte.
Zona fría del norte, muy bien. Oye, ¿qué puede decirme cuáles son las causas de las estaciones del año? A ver, David.
All school instruction was in English until 1948 when Spanish was made the official school language. However, English is taught from grade 1 to grade 12.
What do you want?
I want a bowl.
Do you want a doll?
No, I don't.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Sit down. Class, do you see a doll?
Yes, I do.
Do you see a little doll?
No, I don't.
Do you see a truck?
No, I don't.
Lunchtime at Cupibajo. Another eating situation, Professor Seeley. In this case, the daily lunch is free, no charge to child or parent. More than that, the Puerto Rican student gets free transportation where necessary, free textbooks, and also free medical, dental, and eye care.
Enormous advantages.
Yes, they are.
In fact, they may mean the difference between staying in school and leaving.
Reminiscent of the Japanese situation, Professor Seeley?
No, and it's not really the same thing, I'm afraid. It looks very efficient and clean, and I'm sure they're serving nutritious food. But you note it's very impersonal compared with the Japanese situation. The teachers and students are really separate and, one might almost say, uninterested in each other.
After lunch, Juan calls on the mother of an absent pupil.
El esposo mío está enfermo y está en el hospital. Y entonces es el que me ayuda a hacer la cocina, lo que hay que hacer en la cocina.
I gather that the father is ill and that the boy has to stay home from school to help. And Fernandez appears to sympathize, but to urge the importance of steady school attendance.
I see. Puerto Rico, as you probably know, is largely an agricultural country and far from wealthy. Her crops are lush, but must support too many people. And yet, apparently, this small island is making very impressive gains in education, because since 1940, the number of classrooms has been doubled, 8 times as much money is being spent. Today, 6% of the island's net income is spent on education. I wonder how that would compare with our expenditure.
Well, it's difficult to tell exactly with 10 different provincial educational budgets and each involving so many factors. But I've heard that we spend about 3% of our income in education, and it might be a little more or less than that.
In any case, Puerto Rico's effort seems most impressive.
Very impressive. After all, it's one thing for us to spend millions on education, and it's something else again for a poor tropical island like this.
Del pueblo.
Despite this great effort, Puerto Rico still lacks classrooms and teachers. It's still necessary to hold classes in shifts because of a lack of space, and there's still an average of over 40 pupils to each teacher.
El hidrógeno que se escapa en forma de gas.
Well, it's that happy time, the end of the school day. Not, however, for some of Cupibajo's students. They're to make a TV appearance today. Each week there's an educational quiz on the city's television station. School teams compete on this quiz, and our team is on tonight.
A 12 puntos entre el equipo de Cupey y el equipo de Río Piedras. Vamos ahora inmediatamente al próximo ejercicio que lo hará el estudiante Benigno García del equipo de los Pitirres. Así es que sigue con ustedes el profesor.
Y vamos ahora al ejercicio de geografía con el próximo de los Pitirres. Acérquese aquí, jovencito, vale 8 puntos y tiene usted 1 minuto, compañero. Se fue. El ejercicio está perfecto.
A big triumph for Cupibajo and for Coach Fernandez. And also, of course, at home for Senora Fernandez and the son and heir.
That was a very American sort of thing, wasn't it?
Yes, good fun.
Just how is Puerto Rico connected to the United States?
It's a self-governing commonwealth, not a state, but with strong U.S. attachments, and its people are American citizens. So this is another Main Street USA in many ways. Apropos of film and television in education, have you had any experience with visual aids, Miss Reed?
Yes, I've used films occasionally.
Did you find them effective?
Oh, yes, they sharpen interest and attention in the child.
I wonder what may be the future of film and television in education. Is it conceivable that the teacher of the future, you for instance, might become a TV personality, a face speaking from a screen to thousands of students simultaneously?
I doubt it. Every pupil and class needs individual attention, and only a teacher in a classroom can give this.
What do you think, Professor Seeley?
I thoroughly agree with Miss Reed. I know automation will come in this field as in other fields, but there'll never be a substitute for the classroom teacher.
But surely mass instruction via television or film can't be useful.
Oh, for some things, yes. I think we mustn't underestimate visual aids or even teaching machines. But the object of these is to free the teacher to do her really specific human work with the children.
Miss Reed spoke of the American character of the TV quiz, the teams, special jackets, bells, and buzzers. I suppose the U.S. influence is dominant on the island.
Yes, apart from language and religion and food, in many ways the island is very American. And especially in its educational structure, it's quite like the U.S., and I suppose that would mean that it was quite like us.
Yes, aside from language, I could quite easily see Juan Fernandez teaching in a Canadian school.
There was one thing which struck me, though, the fact that he lived in the city and taught in the country, and I'm not sure that's altogether desirable.
Perhaps a lot more convenient and comfortable for the Fernandez family.
Yes, but living in one milieu and teaching in another adds to the distance, the separateness between teacher and child that we'd like to avoid.
Well, isn't some distance necessary? Perhaps I'm harking back to my own school experience when there seemed to be considerably more discipline imposed than today. I'm wondering, do we need more firmness, more control in our schools?
Yes, we may well need more firmness, but I think it can be a firmness within affection rather than a firmness achieved by the trick of creating distances.
Fernandez did seem a little stiff and formal compared to Kondo, didn't he?
Yes, but that could be no more than a difference in temperament.
Well, that's possible, but I think in an island like Puerto Rico, the teacher actually has to be a little more of an official. The thing that struck me was how dedicated he was, and I would guess that he could have made a lot more money by going into law or medicine.
Isn't this sort of dedication typical of a good many Puerto Ricans?
I guess it has to be. You know, this little island is trying by what it calls Operation Bootstrap to raise its level of living by planning, but without dictatorship. And I think with that kind of operation, it has to depend on a lot of dedicated people.
What is their parallel project called Operation Serenity?
Ah, yes. Well, this is an attempt to make sure that they get industrialization by Operation Bootstrap, while at the same time, by Operation Serenity, they reconquer their pride and their national background, and they really develop their culture.
Very fascinating.
It is.
Well, now, shall we turn to another country apparently gripped by change, to Poland and to a teacher in a school in Warsaw?